Marriage in these days is a mockery, whose management is in the hands of young men and parents. In most countries, the young men win, while the parents lose. The woman is looked upon as a commodity, purchased and delivered from one house to another. In time, her beauty fades, and she becomes like an old piece of furniture, left in a dark corner. Modern civilization has made women a little wiser, but it has increased her suffering because of man's covetousness. The woman of yesterday was a happy wife, but the woman of today is a miserable mistress. In the past, she walked blindly in the light, but now she walks open-eyed in the dark. She was beautiful in her ignorance, virtuous in her simplicity, and strong in her weakness. Today, she has become ugly in her ingenuity, superficial and heartless in her knowledge. Will the day ever come when beauty and knowledge, ingenuity and virtue, and weakness of body and strength of spirit will be united in a woman? I am one of those who believe that spiritual progress is a rule of human life, but the approach to perfection is slow and painful. If a woman elevates herself in one respect and is retarded in another, it is because the tough trail that leads to the mountain peak is not free of ambushes, of thieves and liars, of wolves. This strange generation exists between sleeping and walking. It holds in his hands the soil of the past and the seeds of the future. However, we find in every city a woman who symbolizes the future. In the city of Beirut, Selma Karamy was the symbol of the future Oriental woman, but like many who lie ahead of their time, she became the victim of the present. And like a flower snatched from its stem and carried away by the current of a river, she walked in the miserable procession of the defeated. Mansour Bey Ghalib and Selma were married and lived together in a beautiful house at Ras Beirut, where all the wealthy dignitaries resided. Faris Effendi Karamy was left in his solitary home in the midst of his garden and orchids, like a lonely shepherd amid his flock. The days and merry nights of the wedding passed, but the honeymoon left memories of times of bitter sorrow, as wars leave skulls and dead bones on the battlefield. The dignitary of an Oriental wedding inspires the heart of young men and women, but its termination may drop them like millstones to the bottom of the sea. Their exhilaration is like footprints on sand, which remain only till they are washed away by the waves. Spring departed, and so did summer and autumn. But my love for Selma increased day by day, until it became a kind of mute worship, the feeling that an orphan has toward the soul of his mother in heaven. My yearning was converted to blind sorrow that could see nothing but itself, and the passion that drew tears from my eyes was replaced by perplexity that sucked the blood from my heart, and my sighs of affection became a constant prayer for the happiness of Selma and her husband, and peace for her father. My hopes and prayers were in vain, because Selma's misery was an internal malady that nothing but death could cure. Mansour Bey was a man to whom all the luxuries of life came easily. But in spite of that, he was dissatisfied and rapacious. After marrying Selma, he neglected her father in his loneliness and prayed for his death so that he could inherit what was left of the old man's wealth. Mansour Bey's character was similar to his uncle's. The only difference between the two was that the bishop got everything he wanted secretly under the protection of his ecclesiastical robe and the golden cross which he wore on his chest, while his nephew did everything publicly. The bishop went to church in the morning and spent the rest of the day pilfering from the widows, orphans, and simple-minded people. But Mansour Bey spent his days in pursuit of sexual satisfaction. On Sunday, Bishop Belus Galib preached his gospel, but during the weekdays, he never practiced what he preached, occupying himself with political intrigues of the locality. And by means of his uncle's prestige and influence, Mansour Bey made it his business to secure political plums for those who could offer a sufficient bribe. Bishop Boulos was a thief who hid himself under the cover of night, while his nephew, Mansour Bey, was a swindler who walked proudly in daylight. However, the people of Oriental nations placed trust in such as they. Wolves and butchers who ruined their country through covetousness and crushed their neighbors with an iron hand. Why do I occupy these pages with words about the betrayers of poor nations instead of reserving all the space for the story of a miserable woman with a broken heart? Why do I shed tears for oppressed people rather than keep all my tears for the memory of a weak woman whose life was snatched by the teeth of death? But my dear readers, don't you think that such a woman is like a nation that is oppressed by priests and rulers? Don't you believe that thwarted love which leads a woman to the grave is like the despair which pervades the people of the earth? A woman is to a nation as light is to a lamp. Will not the light be dim if the oil in the lamp is low? Autumn passed, and the wind blew the yellow leaves from the trees, making way for the winter, which came howling and crying. I was still in the city of Beirut without a companion, save my dreams, which could lift my spirit to the sky and then bury deep in the bosom of the earth. The sorrowful spirit finds relaxation in solitude. It abhors people, as a wounded deer deserts the herd and lives in a cave until it's healed or dead. One day I heard Faris Effendi was ill. I left my solitary abode and walked to his home, taking a new route, a lonely path between olive trees, avoiding the main road with its rattling carriage wheels. Arriving at the old man's house, I entered and found Faris Effendi lying on his bed, weak and pale. His eyes were sunken and looked like two deep, dark valleys haunted by the ghosts of pain. The smile which had always enlivened his face was choked with pain and agony, and the bones of his gentle hands looked like naked branches trembling before the tempest. As I approached him and inquired as to his health, he turned his pale face toward me, and on his trembling lips appeared a smile, and he said in a weak voice, "Go, my son, to the other room and comfort Selma, and bring her to sit by the side of my bed." I entered the adjacent room and found Selma lying on a divan, covering her head with her arms and burying her face in a pillow, so that her father could not hear her weeping. Approaching slowly, I pronounced her name in a voice that seemed more like sighing than whispering. She moved fearfully, as if she had been interrupted in a terrible dream, and sat up, looking at me with glazed eyes, doubting whether I was a ghost or a living being. After a deep silence, which took us back on the wings of memory to that hour when we were intoxicated with wine of love, Selma wiped away her tears and said, "See how time has changed us? See how time has changed the course of our lives and left us in these ruins. In this place, spring united us in a bond of love, and in this place has brought us together before the throne of death. How beautiful was spring, and how terrible is this winter." Speaking thus, she covered her face again with her hands as if she were shielding her eyes from the spectre of the past standing before her. I put my hand on her head and said, "Come, Selma, come, and let us be as strong towers before the tempest. Let us stand like brave soldiers before the enemy and face his weapons. If we are killed, we shall die as martyrs. If we win, we shall live as heroes. Braving obstacles and hardships is nobler than retreat to tranquility. The butterfly that hovers around the lamp until it dies is more admirable than the mole that lives in a dark tunnel. Come, Selma, let us walk this rough path firmly, with our eyes toward the sun, so that we may not see the skulls and serpents among the rocks and thorns. If fear should stop us in the middle of the road, we would hear only ridicule from the voices of the night. But if we reach the mountain peak bravely, we shall join the heavenly spirits in song of triumph and joy. Cheer up, Selma. Wipe away your tears and remove the sorrow from your face. Rise. Let us sit by the bed of your father, because his life depends on your life. And your smile is his only cure." Kindly and affectionately, she looked at me and said, "Are you asking me to have patience while you are in need of it yourself? Will a hungry man give his bread to another hungry man? Or will sick man give medicine to another which he himself needs badly?" She arose, her head bent slightly forward, and we walked through the old man's room and sat by the side of his bed. Selma forced a smile and pretended to be patient, and her father tried to make her believe that he was feeling better and getting stronger. But both father and daughter were aware of each other's sorrow and heard the unvoiced sighs. They were like two equal forces, wearing each other away silently. The father's heart was melting because of his daughter's plight. They were two pure souls, one departing and the other agonized with grief, embracing in love and death. And I was between the two with my own troubled heart. We were three people, gathered and crushed by the hands of destiny. An old man like a dwelling ruined by flood. A young woman whose symbol was a lily beheaded by the sharp edge of a sickle. And a young man who was a weak sapling, bent by a snowfall. And all of us were toys in the hands of fate. Faris Effendi moved slowly and stretched his weak hand towards Selma, and in a loving and tender voice said, "Hold my hand, my beloved." Selma held his hand. Then he said, "I have lived long enough, and I have enjoyed the fruits of life's seasons. I have experienced all its phases with equanimity. I lost your mother when you were 3 years of age, and she left you as a precious treasure in my lap. I watched you grow, and your face reproduced your mother's features as stars reflected in a calm pool of water. Your character, intelligence, and beauty are your mother's. Even your manner of speaking and gestures. You have been my only consolation in this life because you were the image of your mother in every deed and word. Now I grow old, and my only resting place is between the soft wings of death. Be comforted, my beloved daughter, because I have lived long enough to see you as a woman. Be happy, because I shall live in you after my death. My departure today will be no different from my going tomorrow or the day after, for our days are perishing like the leaves of autumn. The hour of my days are perishing like the leaves of autumn. The hour of my death approaches rapidly, and my soul is desirous of being united with your mothers. As he uttered these words sweetly and lovingly, his face was radiant. Then he put his hand under his pillow and pulled out a small picture in a gold frame. With his eyes on the little photograph, he said, "Come, Selma, come and see your mother in this picture." Selma wiped away her tears, and after gazing long at the picture, she kissed it repeatedly and cried, "Oh, my beloved mother! Oh, mother!" Then she placed her trembling lips on the picture, as if she wished to pour her soul into that image. The most beautiful word on the lip of mankind is the word mother. And the most beautiful call is the call of my mother. It is a word full of hope and love, a sweet and kind word coming from the depths of the heart. The mother is everything. She is our consolation in sorrow, our hope in misery, and our strength in weakness. She is the source of love, mercy, sympathy, and forgiveness. He who loses his mother loses a pure soul who blesses and guards him constantly. Everything in nature bespeaks the mother. The sun is the mother of earth and gives its nourishment of here. It never leaves the universe at night until it has put the earth to sleep, to the song of the sea and the hymn of birds and brooks. And this earth is the mother of trees and flowers. It produces them, nurses them, and weans them. The trees and flowers become kind mothers of their great fruits and seeds. And the mother, the prototype of all existence, is the eternal spirit, full of beauty and love. Selma Karamy never knew her mother because she had died when Selma was an infant. But Selma wept when she saw the picture and cried, "Oh, mother!" The word mother is hidden in our hearts, and it comes upon our lips in hours of sorrow and happiness as perfume comes from the heart of the rose and mingles with clear and cloudy air. Selma stared at her mother's picture, kissing it repeatedly, until she collapsed by her father's bed. The old man placed both hands on her head and said, "I have shown you, my dear child, a picture of your mother on paper. Now listen to me, and I shall let you hear her words." She lifted her head like a little bird in the nest that hears its mother's wing, and looked at him attentively. Faris Effendi opened his mouth and said, "Your mother was nursing you when she lost her father. She cried and wept at his going. But she was wise and patient. She sat by me in this room as soon as the funeral was over and held my hand and said, 'Faris, my father is dead, and now you are my only consolation in this world. My heart's affections are divided like the branches of the cedar tree. If the tree loses one strong branch, it will suffer, but it does not die. It will pour all its vitality into the next branch so that it will grow and fill the empty place. This is what your mother told me when her father died. And you should say the same thing when death takes my body to its resting place and my soul to God's care. Selma answered him with falling tears and broken heart. My mother lost her father. You took his place. But who is going to take yours when you are gone? She was left in the care of a loving and truthful husband. She found consolation in her little daughter. And who will be my consolation when you pass away? You have been my father and mother and the companion of my youth. Saying these words, she turned and looked at me, and holding the side of my garment said, "This is the only true friend I have after you are gone. But how can he console me when he is suffering also? How can a broken heart find consolation in a disappointed soul? A sorrowful woman cannot be comforted by her neighbor's sorrow, nor can a bird fly with broken wings. He is the friend of my soul, but I have already placed a heavy burden of sorrow upon him and dimmed his eyes with my tears till he can see nothing but darkness. He is a brother whom I dearly love, but he is like all brothers who share my sorrow and help me shed tears which increase my bitterness and burn my heart." Selma's words stabbed my heart, and I felt that I could bear no more. The old man listened to her with depressed spirit. Trembling like the light of a lamp before the wind. Then he stretched out his hand and said, "Let me go peacefully, my child. I have broken the bars of this cage. Let me fly. Do not stop me. For your mother is calling me. The sky is clear, and the sea is calm, and the boat is ready to sail. Do not delay its voyage. Let my body rest with those who are resting. Let my dream end, and my soul awaken with the dawn. Let your soul embrace mine, and give me the kiss of hope. Let no drops of sorrow or bitterness fall upon my body, lest the flowers and grass refuse their nourishment. Do not shed tears of misery upon my hand, for they may grow thorns upon my grave. Do not draw lines of agony upon my forehead, for the wind may pass and wreathe them and refuse to carry the dust of my bones to the green prairies. I love you, my child, while I live, and I shall love you when I am dead. And my soul shall always watch over you and protect you." Then Faris Effendi looked at me with his eyes half closed and said, "My son, be a real brother to Selma as your father was to me. Be her help and friend in need, and do not let her mourn, because mourning for the dead is a mistake. Repeat to her pleasant tales and sing for her the songs of life so that she may forget her sorrows. Remember me to your father. Ask him to tell you the stories of your youth, and tell him that I loved him in the person of his son in the last hour of my life." Silence prevailed, and I could see the pallor of death on the old man's face. Then he rolled his eyes and looked at us and whispered, "Don't call the physician, for he might extend my sentence in this prison by his medicine. The days of slavery are gone, and my soul seeks the freedom of the skies. And do not call the priest to my bedside, because his incantations would not save me if I were a sinner. Nor would it rush me to heaven if I were innocent. The will of humanity cannot change the will of God, as the astrologer cannot change the course of the stars. But after my death, let the doctors and priests do what they please, for my ship will continue sailing until it reaches its destination. At midnight, Faris Effendi opened his eyes for the last time and focused them on Selma, who was kneeling by his bedside. He tried to speak, but could not, for death had already choked his voice. But he finally managed to say, "The night has passed. Oh, Selma! Oh, Selma!" Then he bent his head. His face turned white, and I could see a smile on his lips as he breathed his last. Selma felt her father's hand. It was cold. Then she raised her head and looked at his face. It was covered with the veil of death. Selma was so choked that she could not shed tears, nor sigh, nor even move. For a moment she stared at him with fixed eyes like those of a statue. Then she bent down until her forehead touched the floor and said, "O Lord, have mercy and mend our broken wings." Faris Effendi Karamy died. His soul was embraced by eternity, and his body was returned to the earth. Mansour Bey Ghalib got possession of his wealth, and Selma became a prisoner of life, a life of grief and misery. I was lost in sorrow and reverie. Days and nights preyed upon me like the eagle ravages its victim. Many a time I tried to forget my misfortune by occupying myself with books and scriptures of past generation, but it was like extinguishing fire with oil. For I could see nothing in the procession of the past but tragedy, and could hear nothing but weeping and wailing. The book of Job was more fascinating to me than the Psalms, and I preferred the elegies of Jeremiah to the Song of Solomon. Hamlet was closer to my heart than all other dramas of Western writers. Thus, despair weakens our sight and closes our ears. We can see nothing but spectres of doom, and can hear only the beating of our agitated hearts.